Hello, everyone, and good afternoon. Welcome to the Introduction to Email Threats and Security Attacks webinar. My name is Bobby Claudio, and I will be your moderator for this session. Let me just remind you that this session will be recorded. And before we start our fun and learning, let's have a quick check-in. Could you please say hi and shout out what organization you are from in the chat box? Just click on the chat button below your screen, and please make sure to send it to everyone and not just to the panelists so that we can see. All right, let me just check our chat window. Hello from Davao. Welcome, people from Cebu, people from Don Bosco. We have people from Cavite, Quezon City. Welcome, everyone from Bulacan. People from Caloocan, from Santa Mesa and Batangas. It looks like a very good turnout. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Now, before we proceed, let us just first introduce our company. So, who is Trend Micro? Trend Micro is a cybersecurity company that's been around for more than 30 plus years, leading the market with continuous innovations in virtualization, cloud, artificial intelligence, and IoT. Trend Micro has customers across the top Fortune 500, including 8 of the top 10 global Fortune 500. And we are made up of 6,700 plus trenders who are passionate about making the world a safer and better place for everyone. And now for more reminders for our webinar. So here are the tools you can use to communicate with us. You'll see both the chat and the Q&A buttons at the bottom of your screen. Please use the chat section if you need to send us any feedback during the webinar. And the Q&A section is where you send in your questions. Please remember that you can post them anytime throughout the webinar, but in order to manage our limited time, they will be answered at the end. Basic questions will be answered via chat and the others will be answered live during the Q&A portion. We also use the upvote features of Zoom. If you have the same question, just click on the like button and the questions with the most number of likes will be prioritized during the Q&A portion. You may also add more details to the question by using the comment button. A polling question will be posted from time to time and a separate window will pop up to show the poll. Select your answer from the list and then click submit. The results of the poll will be shown after. Just click close when you're done viewing the results. At the end of the webinar, you will be automatically be routed to a survey form and kindly take time to answer the short survey because your feedback is very valuable to us and will help us improve our succeeding webinars. And those who answer the survey will receive a certificate of attendance for this webinar via email 1 week after this session. Access to the recording of this session, key takeaways, and succeeding webinar schedules will be announced in our Facebook pages at Trend Micro Careers Philippines and Click Right PH. That's Trend Micro Careers Philippines and Click Right PH. You can also send us a message if you want to request a topic you want us to cover in our next webinar. So please like and follow our pages. Before we open, we just want to remind you our house rules and secure learning webinar series code of conduct. The goal of secure learning is very much aligned with the Trend Micro vision to make the world safe for exchanging digital information. Through secure learning webinar series, this series, we aim to make it safe not only through technology, but also by providing a venue for a community that is open to all, regardless of gender, sexual orientation, disability, ethnicity, or religion. It is our goal to provide a positive virtual experience for all participants, and we implore everyone to read through our code of conduct to understand what is expected of secure learning webinar participants. Possible consequences for untoward behavior are in Secure Learning's committee sole discretion, and the decision or decisions of the committee will be final. Consequences, breaches of this code of conduct may result in disqualification from participating in future live and virtual events and from engagement across Trend Micro blogs, online forums, and social media channels. Okay, so it's time for you guys to meet our speaker. Miguel Carlo Ang, also known as Miko, is a graduate of Mapua Institute of Technology. He began his career in cybersecurity at Trend Micro back in 2011, starting as a member of the Web Reputation Services team, where he evaluated suspicious websites and performed research and documentation for the solution delivered. He also took on a threat research engineer position where he was able to analyze different threats and make technical reports and sandboxing solutions for them. Currently an end-to-end analysis expert, he now focuses on malware research, exploring the bigger picture, ransomware decryption, and the latest threats that are in the cybersecurity world today. So ladies and gentlemen, it was with great pleasure that I present to you Miko. Miko, I'm going to stop my share so you can start sharing your presentation. Hello,
Okay,
Vico.
I'll
All right.
share my screen now. Okay, thank you, Bob, for that wonderful introduction. And just to show everyone that we are live, I will now turn on my camera. Hi, I'm Miguel, and I will be your speaker for this afternoon. But to save bandwidth, I will have to turn off my camera now. So let's start. What can you expect from this webinar? Here are the main points that we will talk about today. We will look at the different types of email-based threats. We will then discuss what can happen to you if you fall for these threats. Then we will also discuss some things to watch out for to identify these threats. And finally, some tips on mitigating these types of threats. So first of all, the parts of an email. There are three parts to an email. First is the header, which contains the information about the email, such as the from, to, and subject fields. Then the body, which contains the content of the message. And this may include text, images, and the attachments that you may use on that email. And finally, we have the envelope, which I think most of you are not aware of. And this is because the envelope is automatically created the moment you hit send on your email application and is deleted when your mail arrives to the recipient's SMTP server just before reaching their mailbox. And this contains the information used between the SMTP client and server. So why am I telling you this? This is because all of the information that can be found here can be forged. You can easily create an email to look like it came from somebody else and trick people from there. The point being, do not trust everything that you see. Judge it by its contents and what it's trying to do. So this code is a nice thing to keep in mind throughout the examples I am going to go through today, which are spam. And I don't mean the one that you eat. I'm talking about email spam, also referred to as junk mails. So they are unwanted, unsolicited messages and are usually sent in bulk. So some of you might already be asking this question. Is spam bad? Now, while most of these spam are commercial in nature, like the ones that you see companies use to market their product or their business, there's a good number of them that are dangerous and have malicious intent, which we will discuss next. So these are the type of email-based threats. And while there are certainly more out there, they can be summarized into three main types: scam, phishing, and malspam. But before we proceed, we will have a quick poll. I want to know which of these threats have you heard of before? Bob, can you help up pull our first poll?
Sure. There you go.
So I would like to remind everyone that you have about 20 seconds to answer this poll. And Bob, while they're choosing their answers, I want to know which of these threats have you heard of before?
Well, of course, phishing, Malspam, I just learned about. Scams, I'm not so sure because the only scams that I know are not in the cyber world, but phishing and Malspam.
Okay, so I think 20 seconds is up. So let's see what our audience pick, Bob. Ah, okay. Majority is knows phishing and scams. So it's good because you are at least familiar with the next topics. So let us first take a look at scam mails. So this is the type of mail that tricks the victim into fraudulent business or a scheme that promises things such as personal or monetary gain in exchange of something. And this something is usually a fee or an investment. Common scam mails will contain subjects such as fake business ventures, donations, and lottery wins. We will now take a look at our first example. And the gist of this email is that they claim that they have used a malware to infect a certain website you were browsing. And the website that you were browsing happens to be an adult site. And due to the malware that they use, they are now claiming that they have information on what you were browsing. Then further down the email, they are asking you for a payment, or else they will leak the information and you will be exposed. This is an example of an extortion scam, where scammers use social engineering to make you pay the money. And for those of you who are not familiar with what social engineering is, it is the art of tricking someone into divulging personal information or making them do something that they would not normally do. The idea behind social engineering is that you take advantage of a person's natural tendencies and emotions. And in this case, the scammers are using your fear of getting exposed to make you pay. So this example is newer and timely because it leverages on the current pandemic. And if we take a look at the email, it has an enticing and relevant subject. This is used to lure in the victim. Taking a closer look at the contents, it offers some sort of debt relief to those who are struggling with money. This type of scam might be irresistible. So finally, it also created a sense of urgency in the email by setting up a deadline before contacting them before the offer expires. Again, this type of fake fund relief are common in scam mails. For this example, the email claims that you won a lottery. Looking at the contents of the mail, it uses a generic greeting. A generic greeting is some kind of greeting that's not referring to somebody specific, mainly due to the fact that these mails are sent in bulk. And if it does use something specific, it will use your email address because it knows your email address in the first place. And it also urges you to look at the attachment. And this is very dangerous because since it is one of the most common ways of getting infected by a malware or getting phished for your credentials. Finally, it also created a sense of urgency by setting up a deadline. So what happens if you open up the attachment? You will be redirected to this page. So it is a page that is specially crafted to make it look like the link you were visiting is legitimate. And upon clicking the click here link, you will then be redirected to another site. So this site. So this site collects your information such as your address, occupation, email address, phone number, and country. Now, with the exception of our first example, the next emails that we went through did not make us pay a fee, and instead just asked us to contact them. So, what's the harm in replying? Well, first, you just entered your personal information on a random website you know nothing about, information that can be used to steal your identity. You also gave scammers a heads up that you are a prime victim. Why? By clicking the link and contacting them, giving them your information, it tells them a couple of things about you. First, you express interest on what they were offering. So remember, these mails are sent in bulk. So by you replying to them, just gave them that a clue that the ones that they sent out is working for you. And such, you are susceptible to social engineering tricks. So lastly, you are desperate. Desperate for what? For something. It may be money, love, companionship, all of which can be used by scammers to make it more enticing to you and tricking you. So just imagine if you are someone who really needs the money, and scams like this might be something irresistible to you. Let's now move on to phishing mail. And you might already be familiar with the type of email of this email threat because if you have a bank account, chances are that they have already sent you a couple of warnings about phishing mails. And phishing is a type of attack where an attacker tries to obtain sensitive information or data, such as your personal credentials. And phishing mails also may try to spoof specific brands or sites to lure you into giving your credentials. So time for our next poll. And this will serve as a review for those who have chosen phishing mail in our previous poll. So is this a phishing mail? Bob, kindly help up pull the poll.
Sure. Here you
Again, for
go.
everyone, you have 20 seconds to answer the question. Is this a phishing mail? So, Bob, what do you think this is?
I think it is.
You think so?
Yes.
Well,
Let's
we
see
will
if
see.
I'm right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll see if you're correct. Bob, what did our audience think? So yes, majority of you already know that this is a phishing mail, and you are too correct to think that. So let's just quickly review this, right? So even though even though the sender looks like that it may came from PayPal, we already know that there is a chance that it may be fake. If you also look at the subject, there is a sense of urgency there because they are saying that it requires immediate verification. And finally, it is tricking you into clicking the link to a phishing site. So this doesn't actually point to PayPal, but to a phishing site. So good job on that one. And this example is similar to the previous one. First, the email used a logo from PayPal to make it look like the email came from them. Second, there is an alleged account compromise that needs your immediate attention. And finally, it tricks you into clicking the link below. So this is a link to your to the phishing site. So this is a classic example of a phishing mail. So this text example is something might be some of you might be familiar with because it involves Netflix. And if you take a look at the subject there, it uses a spoof name or a fake name. So it's not actually from Netflix, but it's from Netflix, spelled with two capital I's to make it look like it came from Netflix. Next up, it tricks you into clicking the link below to verify your account. And even though it says Netflix there, for those who have knowledge in creating websites, you can change where the link actually goes, as we can see here in the screenshot below. So it's not actually going to Netflix, but it's going to a phishing site. Finally, we go through our last phishing example. And this is an interesting one. First, we go through the usual things we look for in a phishing email, such as the generic greeting. And then there's this attachment that looks like a tax return. So what happens if we click on the attachment? So if we click on that attachment, we are redirected to this spoof page of what looks like a document that needs our credentials to open. And this phishing mail takes advantage of Office 365, in which we need to log in. We need to log in our credentials to view the document. So what happens if we entered our credentials? It will show you this fake invoice. But before showing it to you, this page will ask you for your credentials 3 times. So why is it doing this? First, to avoid suspicion. So imagine this. You entered a credential to open the document, and now you are expecting that the document will show up once you have done this. So if no document showed up, you will get that feeling that something is wrong and that your account is compromised. So the fishers don't want that. So, but why ask for the credentials 3 times? Why not just take the credentials and leave with it, right? So this is because in the past, it is a good check for a phishing site to type anything on the fields and try signing in. So as you can see in the screenshot, it's just a random gibberish, right? So this usually works since phishing sites tends to accept every input to fish out your credentials. But as time goes on, the scammers took notice of this and are now putting a minimum amount before showing you the fake invoice. And it also serves as a failsafe for incorrect input. But even though it takes 3 times, each attempt sends the data to the phishing site. And again, this is just one of the tricks scammers or criminals use to make it look like more realistic. Now, let's move on to the final one, which is Malspam. And it stands for malicious spam or malware spam. And it is commonly seen using a file attachment or an embedded URL. But before we begin, let's have another poll. Do you remember this threat? So, a computer worm that infected millions of computers all over the world. And it was created by Onel de Guzman, who was a college student in Manila. And the original purpose of it was to steal password of ISP accounts. So, Bob, can you help out pull up the choices?
Sure.
So, Bob, while they're answering, do you remember this threat? I believe this one
Yes.
on the news.
That was the I love you virus.
You think so?
Yes. Way
I think
back
so
then.
too. I think so too
It's
because
probably
the
also
subjects,
written there. Yeah.
yeah, because the subjects says I love you. But we
Yeah.
will see. So, what did our audience think? And most of you got it right. It's the I love you virus. And this is a classic example of a malspam where it uses the email to deliver a malware, which then infects a user, then causes the malware to spread even further. And fun fact, even though it's a called I love you virus, it's actually a computer worm. But before we go, Bob, we have another poll. So yeah,
Sure.
so take this scenario for an example. You receive an email with an attachment that the content of the email seemingly did not have malicious intent. Which the following attachment do you think would pose the least amount of threat? So, Bob, what do you think would pose the least amount of threat?
Least amount of threat.
Yeah,
I
least
think
amount
they're
of threat.
all threats actually.
Are you sure? Even
Yeah.
documents?
Yes. Yes.
Well, let's see. Let's see what the our audience think.
All right. Let's pull that out.
Okay, most of you said that it was documents. Ah, interesting. So the answer I was looking for was none of the above. To be frank, there is pretty much the same level of risk involved in opening any of these documents. And if you, especially if you see them in an email. So let's go through them one by one. So these are the general types of malspam you would see. And there are certainly more out there, but I try and generalize them as much as possible for this one. First, we have the malspam that uses links and URLs. And this type of malspam will urge you to click on the link to download a malicious file. And you will also see that same with the previous scams and phishing threats, all of the malspam emails will use social engineering tricks to trick you into downloading or executing the malicious file. And if you downloaded the malicious file, the file will also exhibit some social engineering tricks to fool the user into executing them, such as changing the icon and file name to resemble that of a harmless file. So the next example is the malspam that uses executables or scripts. And if you remember the earlier poll questions of the I love you virus, this is one that we are talking about now. And this type of email will have a malicious attachment. And these attachments are executable files, such as exe files, or any scripts such as VBS, JS, or any other programming scripts. And this type of malspam is kind of rare nowadays because most email providers will automatically block any email containing executable attachments. But if you happen to own a website, operate your own website and your own SMTP server, you might not be protected the same way. So you might still receive these types of mass spam. So the next one is the mass spam that uses archives. Archives are any files that is a result of an archiving software such as WinRAR. So malspam using archives are quite common because they are used to generally evade spam filters. And a good number of them uses lesser known archives, such as the ones that you see in this example. Left one is an LZH file, and the next one is a CAB file. So what do we see if we opened up the attached archive? We will see the malicious file inside the archive. And in this example, the name of the file is project documents underscore pdf.exe. And as I said before, the file may exhibit social engineering tricks to lure the victim into executing them, such as changing the icon or file name to make it look like a harmless file. And to better illustrate that concept, let's take a look at this poll. So this will be our last poll. Which of the following files is safe? Is it the left one, the right one, both? Not enough information. Bob, can you help put the choices for a final poll?
Sure.
So this is a tricky one. So which one do you think is safe, Bob?
Well, before I answer that, actually, I just wanted to say that I misunderstood your question earlier. I thought you meant that what I meant was all of them are potential threats. But anyway, okay, going back to
Okay,
this.
saving
Um,
some face there.
yeah, you know. Anyway, going back to this, uh, they look very alike, but I don't know. I'm not really sure. It could be an optical illusion that the left one is highlighted. So I don't know. I would say not enough information.
Okay,
That
let's
would be
see
my
what our
choice.
audience pick.
Sure. Let me just share the results.
Okay, most of you has chosen not enough information, and you would correct to think so, because there's not really enough information to tell that which of the files are safe. So let's try this again, but this time we will tweak some Windows settings. So in this slide, I've enabled Windows to show the file's extension name to see what kind of file it is. So the left one is an executable file, and the right one is a harmless PDF file. So now, can you identify which file is safe? And this is what I meant when I said that the bad guys employ social engineering tricks to make it look like the file is a harmless file. And in this example, it's disguised as a PDF file. So then the last type of malspam we will go through today is the malspam that uses documents. And this is the type one of the most common ones because documents are one of the most effective lures to use in a mass spam campaign. Because documents are usually associated with word processors such as Microsoft Word and Excel to do word processing tasks. And most people don't know that documents can be used to execute malicious code. And mass spam that uses documents can be further classified into two types. The first type is the one that uses macro. And some of you might already know what a macro is. And for those of you who don't know what a macro is, they are used to automate repetitive tasks such as applying filters to a group of cells or applying a formula. And the underlying programming language behind macro is VBA or Visual Basic for Applications. So if you are proficient enough in programming, you can write a macro to perform malicious routines. So in this slide, I will show you the common signs that you are dealing with a macro. If you see this kind of document that says that this document is protected and that you should enable content to view its contents, then you are probably dealing with a malicious macro document. First of all, you will see this enable document button above. This just means that there is a macro in that document. And this button will show up if you have macros disabled, which is disabled by default. Second, it says that the document is protected. This is not what a protected document means or looks like. Protected document may mean that the document is read-only, and in which case, the notification above or the button above will say enable editing, not enable content. Just to check if you have your macros disabled, you can go through the Microsoft Word options, then trust settings, then macro settings. And it should be disabled by default. So another type of malspam that uses documents are exploits. Exploits are attacks that takes advantage of a bug or vulnerability in an application. So unlike macros, exploits will run upon opening the vulnerable application. And also unlike macros, it is only mitigated by patching. So in this example, it is uh, kind of the same as the previous one, the one that lures the victim into opening the document, the attached document you can see below. But unlike the previous one, wherein it will ask you to enable content, this is a specially crafted document that will execute the malicious code upon opening it. So there will be no prompt to enable any content. And this is the application versions that are vulnerable. So if you see the ones that the Microsoft Office version that you are using is listed here below, it is imperative that you update it. Let's now take a look at what can happen to you if you fall for these types of threats. First, you might incur financial loss. So as with any real life scam, most of these email scam will dupe you out of your money. And fees will usually start out small, so a small investment. But in time, more fees will be created before you can earn your reward. So this is how the scammers hook you in the scam. So to drain your bank accounts. The next one is access to your personal information. And this one is something that some people may take for granted. With personal information, the bad guys can access your bank accounts or any other accounts, such as your email. And all they have to do is to verify the account's information using yours. And since they have your personal information, they can also crack email based two factor authentication for the same reason. And then, if they take hold of your credit card, they can also make purchases online in your name. And probably one of the most significant one is that they may use your information to impersonate you and scam your friends and family. And finally, your information can be used to attack or compromise the organization you are working or affiliated with. So the next is you can also get infected by a malware. And the kind of malware we get from this type of threats may vary. And one of the most common things that you might get from are information stealers and backdoor. And with those in your system, attackers can gain full control of your system. They can also steal your files and password. And these two malware are the most common since cyber criminals are always on the lookout for credentials to steal and systems to compromise for their botnets. And just to illustrate what an attacker can do if they had full system information, a full system control, take a look at this image. This is what the attacker can see from his point of view. So they can do pretty much anything they want, probably even more. They can create, and delete files, turn on your webcam or your microphone, record and take a screenshot of your screens. They can pretty much do anything. They can even go through the system for any stored passwords. Another type of malware you may encounter from Malspam is ransomware. Well, ransomware is a type of malware that encrypts your files, rendering them useless. And this malware is named this way because it demands you to pay a ransom in exchange for decrypting the files. Now we go through the ways to spot these threats. So through the examples I showed you, you might now have a good idea on the general characteristics of these threats. So first up, there is this sense of urgency. This is to force action from the victim, since you are more likely to do something and has a higher chance of overlooking details when something is urgent or requires immediate action. Next up are generic greetings. So this is because spam messages are created and sent in bulk. So remember, legitimate companies will almost always address you with your name or your account number. Next up is spelling and grammar errors. So take a look also at those things. Next up is the email will ask you for your personal information. So if it claims that it is from a company that you are subscribed in and is asking you for personal information, such as your password, that should be a red flag. Then it also urges you to click on a link or open up an attachment. So legitimate companies such as your email provider would never urge you to click on a link or open up an attachment, even in the event of a security breach. They will just ask you to reset your password from their site, and it's generally safer that way. It is safer to go to the site on your browser and typing the URL than to go to the website via a link from your email. Next up, offers that are too good to be true. These are common in scam mails. If you suspect that the offer is too good to be true, then it is probably it is too good to be true. Finally, look for typical spam words such as additional income, $1 million donation, you won, your account has been locked. These subjects are typically used to stir up your emotions and bait you into empty promises and getting scammed or compromised. So we are now at the last part of my sharing, and for this section, we will discuss ways on how you could mitigate these threats. First thing is proper password management. So what are the things to remember? Set a strong password. So password 123 or 123456 are not strong passwords. Avoid using birthday, name, or anything that is related to you, as these passwords are easily guessed. So setting up a password is also not enough. Even though you set a strong password, if you do not uh, regularly change it, you are still at risk. Also, do not reuse your passwords. Attackers and hackers usually have this list of passwords that work on other accounts. And reusing a previous password will put you at risk and negates the benefits of regularly changing your password. The next one is that I think many of us are guilty of, and it's the one that using the same password for all of your accounts. So using the same password for all of your accounts is risky, since a compromise on a single account will basically compromise the all of your accounts. So you basically have two choices, right? So take first is to take the necessary steps in keeping your account secure or living with the risk involved. So I just the well the previous choice. Next is to avoid saving your password on your browser. So I know this is a convenience kind of thing, but as I discussed before, some malwares can go through your browsers to steal your stored credentials in them. And finally, you can consider using a password manager. So this is an application that is used to generate a strong and unique password for multiple accounts. All you have to do is remember a single password, which is a strong password, to be used as a key for the password manager. So Next thing you can do to mitigate these types of threats is using multi-factor authentication or two-factor authentication. So how can these mitigate these threats? So first, it gives you another layer of protection since it gives you a notification that someone is trying to access your account. And same with the reason above, by having two-factor authentication enabled, it can notify your account was compromised. And one thing to keep in mind is that you should keep your devices that you use as a recovery or authentication device updated because it has some risk involved, which I will show you later. Finally, remember that two-factor authentication is not a replacement for a strong password. So always use a strong password and multi-factor authentication in tandem. So as I've mentioned now, you should always keep your recovery options and two-factor authentication devices updated since there are risks involved in not updating them. So this is just a short story, and this happened to my Facebook account. And maybe this thing also happened to some of you, so you can relate. So this account uses a strong password, and this password is changed on a set amount of time. And this password is also never reused. So basically, it has proper password management. And it also has a two-factor authentication enabled, as well as a security notification linked to my phone. Now, what happened was there was another person that was able to log into my account despite the security precautions I enabled. So what happened? So this is where the danger lies in when you don't update your two-factor and recovery devices. So the person was able to log into my account using an old number of mine that was still listed in my recovery options. So in Facebook, you can log in to an account using your recovery options like your phone. So it turns out that this number that I was no longer using was reassigned to somebody. And this person used this number to log into my account. So let that be a lesson to everyone to keep your recovery and authentication devices updated. So another thing you can do to mitigate these threats is to limit where you post your personal information or email. So every word you type in a forum or a website can be searched and will be well, it will probably stay there in the internet. So if you put your personal information out there, even just your name or your email address, you can make it easier for people with malicious intent to find you. So be careful on what you put out there. So have you ever wondered why you are receiving spam or phishing emails in the first place? Well, this is how they get you. So you may have put your email somewhere out there and bots probably has gotten hold of it and it's probably distributed to the internet. So the bots routinely crawl every website in search of emails and give them to spammers. And the spammers now use this email to send spam. So that's how you get spam message in the first place or malicious emails in the first place. So the next one is to show extensions. So as I mentioned before, not being able to see what kind of file it is can leave you guessing on what file, which is a good file and which is a bad file. So this is another layer of protection visually because it can help you identify malspam attacks. And it adds, remember that in malspam mails, the attachment or the malware will always try their best to imitate a normal file and change their properties such as the icon and file name. Finally, always think before you click. So break the habit of not reading your email and clicking every random link and attachment you see in an email. So if an email you receive is not something you would expect to receive, such as a PayPal message where you don't even use PayPal, it's better to just delete it. Always think of the intention of the email. If you remember the quote I showed you at the start of this talk, judge the email by its content and what it's trying to do. If that email, no matter how real it may seem, is trying to make you click on a link or an attachment, that should be a red flag. And you should always assume that any links and attachments from an email can potentially harm you. So, if you encountered someone urging you to click on a link in an email, think first before you click because one single vulnerability is all an attacker needs. Be this an application vulnerability or just a lapse on your judgment by clicking on the link. All it takes is one click, one vulnerability to getting compromised. So take the necessary security measures to protect your accounts and always think before you click. And thank you, everyone. I hope you learned something today. And well, that will be all for my presentation.
All right. Thank you, Miko. Let me just start sharing my screen. Okay. So again, thank you, Miko, for that very informative presentation. And we're now going to move to our Q&A. So our subject matter experts have been joining our speaker and answering some of the questions. And again, please be reminded that we will only answer inquiries within the scope of our expertise. So let's start with the first question that has the most upvotes. Okay, let me just pull up our Q&A. Okay, so the one with the most upvotes is, what are your options once you get hit by a ransomware attack? This is coming from Ralph Luna.
Hello. Yeah. So we always urge you to not pay the ransom because paying the ransom just encourages the ransomware creators to basically infect even more because think of it as a business. If something's working, why change it, right? So we always urge you to not pay the ransom. So one option you can do is to always keep a backup of your files. So that's one way, and also you can also look for online for specific decryption tools or keys because from experience, ransomware operators will usually leak or what's the word? Publish. Publish all private switch. I read the kill switch there. A private key. A private key is what you need to decrypt the files. So they would periodically release that for an older version of the ransomware. So yeah. So always back up your files. And so if you don't have backup, best chance you get is uh, to look for online that has decryption keys available or private keys that has been released by the ransomware operators. So I hope you understand, and I hope that I was able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you. By the way, guys, since we're also live on Facebook, we're also going to be addressing some of the questions from Facebook. So there's a question from coming from Facebook from Patrick Jones Mislang. Can we have a GeoIP address trace on the origin of malicious email?
Hmm. This is interesting because to me personally, I don't see the point of that. You can actually have a GeoIP trace, but the problem is that most probably that the IP would get is someone who is also compromised by a malware. So the way this whole spamming game works is that uh, the actual bad guys that are behind are infecting computers. So once you have an infected computers, they would tell that computer or that system to send email spams. So this is what we call a spamming botnet or whatnot. So that's what they do. So if you trace a certain IP, there's a chance that the IP will get is something that is just a bystander, right? An infected user, not the actual spammers. So yeah, that's it. So you can have a geo IP location from the spammer, but it's kind of pointless, right? So I hope I was able to answer that question.
Okay, thank you. Next question is coming from Unicia Mediodia. Where do you report these illegal activities and do they get penalized?
Ah, yes, they do get penalized, but yeah, there's actually kind of a well, the short answer is yeah, they can get penalized. Where you can report them is, for example, you are dealing with a phishing email of a certain bank. So I would personally report that to my bank, saying, hey, there's this phishing email I've been receiving. So you can report it to them, and if you're if you're using some sort of anti-malware, antivirus, you can also report them if the email is not yet blocked. So you can report those types of emails as well. So yeah, I hope I was able to answer that question.
All right, thank you. Let's now go back to Facebook. A question coming from Ray. Is it safe to use an extension like the email meter that has access on Gmail itself?
Can you repeat the question?
The question is it safe to use an extension like the email meter that has access on Gmail itself?
An email meter? I'm not actually familiar with that one, but I'm assuming you are talking about an application that is linked to an email. So if that's your question, it really depends on what kind of application you are using. If you're using some sort of sketchy application, you know what I'm talking about, sketchy applications. So generally, I would rather not want to uh, want that application anywhere near my uh, email accounts. So it depends on the application you use. So I'm not personally familiar with you're uh, what you're referring to. Sorry. So yeah,
All right, next question is from Juart Dizon. How safe really is the incognito mode?
incognito mode. So what basically uh, incognito mode does is mm, how do I explain it in a short way? So I use it as a default browsing method. So are you familiar with cookies? So these are the files that the websites use to basically to track what you are doing. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. So cookies can be used to track what contents have you been browsing, and it makes it efficient to organize what contents you would like to show. So if you're wondering why uh, I know that this type of thing happens to everyone. If you were searching for a certain DSLR camera or specific computer, now you when you browse your Facebook, for example, or any sites, you now have targeted ads that are showing you browser cameras, camera models, or computers that you were browsing. So how are they able to do that? It's because of the cookies. And what mode does basically is when you log into a session, all of the cookies are deleted when you close that incognito browser. So that's basically what it does. So yeah, so it's for the cookies.
Okay, thank you. I just like to remind everyone, because I've been also looking at the chat area, that your questions should be posted here in the Q&A. And if you want them to be answered, please click the upvote feature. The next question with the most upvotes is from Micaela Nicolas. For example, a file is infected. Can we access the code they inserted and just remove it?
Sorry, can you repeat?
Okay. The question is, for example, a file is infected. Can we access the code they inserted and just remove it?
File is infected. Uh, well, depends on your skills. Well, if you are trained, you can. Because that is basically what cleaning a file or a antivirus does. is removing the malicious code in the infected file. So if you can do that manually, why not? So if you're trained, yes. But if you're saying from a perspective of someone who is not trained, it's kind of difficult to mess with these kinds of files because you can end up doing more damage than good. So yeah.
All right. We still have 5 minutes on the clock. Next question. Is from Michaela Nicolas as well? Is it really safe to have a two-factor authentication? Can they hack it?
Hmm.
And just to follow up with that question, because she has a question related to that, for third-party apps of the two-factor authentication, can they be hacked as well?
So can they be hacked? Two-factor authentication. I've seen a recent demonstration uh, that can uh, can hijack a session. So it uses I don't know what signal. Is it a 5G signal? It pertains to a certain technology. So in that technology, it's a mobile device. They were able to hijack the session, and the 2FA, the code was sent to a specific to an attacker's phone. So even though they can kind of theoretically do that, it's kind of hard and it's on the proof of concepts stage. So I wouldn't uh, say that it's not entirely hijacked or compromised or hacked, but it's unlikely. So for the safeness or of two-factor authentication, they are generally safe. Yes. So yeah, you can use them.
Okay. We're going back to Facebook. This question is coming from Patrick Jones Mislang. Is biometrics safe to use as authentication?
Hmm. Biometrics use. Think of it as just another password. So I'm not aware of anything that any threats yet that specifically targets biometrics. If you're using a face biometric authentication, like if you're familiar with the ones that you use to unlock your phone using your face, and it will and if you just showed a picture of that person and not the actual person, if it's the phone is unlocked, then that might be a potential risk. But fingerprints in general, I don't see any some threats yet that attack specifically targets those. So just think of it as a as another layer of security. So it can't exist alone. Just like your password, it cannot exist alone without other measures of protections. So I hope that I was able to answer that question.
Okay. We've got 2 minutes on the clock. We have one more question. This has the most upvotes from Diane April Gudillo. Is it possible to track attackers, especially those who send ransomware?
Is it possible to track? Yes. The problem is it's very hard. As I mentioned before, the email question, attackers don't usually send attacks from their home PCs. They will use certain techniques to such as proxies or other infected device or peer-to-peer connections to make it harder for them to be traced. So that's the name of the game. They can be tracked. The problem is it's kind of hard and it takes a long time. So yeah, that's basically it. It's much more complicated than that, but that's the gist of it. So I hope
Okay.
I was able to answer that.
Thank you, Miko. Next question. We still have 1 minute left from Delton Monit. Is formatting the only solution once you get hit by ransomware?
That's not the only solution, but I think that's the common solution because if you got hit by a ransomware, chances are that also if you don't back up your drives regularly, chances are you don't really have a backup of your system. So reformatting is the common solution. But the only solution, I don't think so, because there's always alternatives, such as the ones I said before, such as the most effective one is just uh, making a backup for your system. And yeah, that's basically it, because you pretty much can't do anything once the files is encrypted, because this is me speaking from experience, because I'm dealing with ransomware decryption. And the way you decrypt a ransomware is basically you look for some flaws in their encryption algorithm, which seldom happens. And you also need to look for private keys that can enable that can decrypt your files. So it's very generally hard. So the options that you would likely be pigeonholed to is reformatting. But as I said, always backup, because ransomware is a threat, and when you don't have a backup, well, you're kind of screwed.
Okay. I just got word that we can entertain two more questions.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the
Go
previous
ahead.
one was the second to the last. And now for our last question. We'll go back to Facebook. The question is from the Rotaract Club of Cavite State University Rosario campus. Just in case all else fails, how should I be prepared for an attack?
Mm, all else fails, how can you be prepared for an attack? So, what kind of attack really? It is a very broad subject. So, one thing I can share you is to uh, live and breathe security, right? Because you think that security or being secure is just something that you enable, right? Like enabling this and that, but it's actually more of a kind of a lifestyle. So if you live and read security, like the ones I mentioned on how to mitigate the threats of being aware of when something is a phishing mail, or not clicking every link that you see, or uh, uh, having your information out there, posting your information all over the internet. So those can help you mitigate these types of threat. And if you practice proper password management, uh, yeah, two-factor authentication enabled, having these security features would help you be more prepared for an attack. Because yeah, as I've said, it's not a simple switch which you can on. It's a lifestyle. So yeah, you just live the a secure life. So that's the best advice I can give you.
All right. Thank you very much, Miko. Thank you so much for your questions, everyone. We have 106, but that's all the time that we have for this afternoon. And I'd like to, again, congratulate our speaker and, of course, our subject matter experts for helping us. And that was a great and informative and definitely an awesome presentation. I'd like to remind everyone that our next webinar topic would be the introduction to web security threats. This will be on December 10, 2020 from 4 to 5 p.m. Please visit our Facebook pages, Trend Microcareers Philippines and Click Right. Again, that's Trend Microcareers Philippines and Click Right for additional announcements. The key takeaways for this session and access to the recording will also be posted there. And please like and follow these pages to stay updated. For your survey, because a lot of people have been asking about that, and feedback, kindly take a snapshot of this QR code and answer the survey after leaving the session to get your certificate of attendance. So, on behalf of Trend Micro, again, this is Bob Claudio, and I also speak for our speaker, Miguel Ang. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and have a wonderful day ahead. Stay safe, everyone. Goodbye.